Thank you, everybody, for coming. Uh, uh, if you want to put in the chat, I'm just curious of how many people are actually using Amazon Web Services or RDS currently. It's always good to know my audience. But besides that, so let me tell you a little story about what we tried to accomplish with Amazon Web Services RDS. So when we first moved, we're thinking about moving to AWS at 0 here. We wanted to have something where we didn't have to touch the databases. It could be maintained as a service. We were definitely interested in what RDS offers. And as I go through these slides, I'm going to show you the story of what we discovered and what happened at the end. So be aware of that. So 1 second here. Of course. Okay. And so my bio real quick. I'm a SQL Server DBA at 0. If you're interested, we're hiring. I've used SQL Server since 2000. My Twitter is TiggyTong. Email is there as well. I also have a blog but it's mostly older reporting things and things like that. So overview, what is RDS? What's required to get it started? I'm going to create an instance. I'm going to query the instance, talk a little bit about compatibility issues within RDS for SQL Server. And we're also going to show you how to automate it a little bit with what's called CloudFormation. So one thing to note, AWS is a living cloud environment. Things change very rapidly. I mean, week to week, basically, but they are constantly iterating it and things like that. So anything presented here could be different in a year or even like 6 months too. So just keep that in mind when it comes to anything I show you here. So what is RDS? It stands for Relational Database Services. And basically it's a web service set up to operate, scale a relational database in the cloud. And we're not just talking SQL Server here. They also have Postgres, Oracle, MySQL, and with MySQL they also have Maria. You can use any of those. It comes in 2 flavors. Basically your standard install of those types of databases, or there's another one called Aurora where they have a more scalable option, and I'll cover a little bit of that at the end. And then it manages all your administrative tasks. You don't have to worry about patching, don't have to worry about doing any upgrades. It will do that all for you. But it comes with a little bit of a cost in the fact that you have restrictive access. You aren't allowed to go to the actual server itself or anything like that. It will only let you just connect to the database and that's it. So, and also there are other things to do with like logins and things like that you can't touch as well. So what is required to get started? It's real easy. All you have to do is create an AWS account. It's free, just aws.amazon.com. Basically, you'll just log into a thing called console.aws.com, and it'll ask you for a credit card, and then you'll just you can start making instances right away, basically. You have to select your instance type. It can go all the way from 2008 R2 to 2017. I'm not sure with 2008 going out of service if they'll have that available here shortly, but I do know some like older environments still use a lot of 2008. We're talking like the most stuff I've heard is like old laboratories where they don't upgrade their equipment that often. It also includes Express, Web, Standard, or Enterprise. There is no Dev one. They don't allow that one. I'm not 100% sure why, but it might just be a licensing thing. So it can be set as production or not. So you can either bring your own license or the license can be included. You bring your own license and you have certain arrangements with Microsoft already. If you tell it it's a test environment, it's possible you could get out of paying that licensing fee, something like that. So it's real simple. You just make a database instance name, the username and master username and password, and those are just SA passwords basically. You specify virtual private cloud and security groups. So we'll go over that a little bit. Basically, everything is inside its own little cloud within AWS. And security groups can be basically done through CIDR blocks, and you could tell, I only want this web server to touch the SQL Server, and that's it. Or I want these Bastion servers so I can restrict what's going on to them. And you can also specify backup retention period. So when I say backup, I mean snapshot. I'll go over that a little bit when we actually make the thing. There is no native backup built into RDS, but there are ways to get that out instead. So we're just going to go a quick demo here, and we're going to create an RDS instance, query the instance, and talk a little bit about compatibility issues. So let me go back over to my thing here. So this is the AWS Management Console. Like I said before, console.aws.amazon.com if you're not familiar with AWS. It's real simple. You've got a bunch of services. They have so many services. A lot of IoT stuff over here. There's a lot of machine learning they have. You could get lost in here for days. But mainly what we're interested in is the database side. And these are all the things that they kind of offer as their services. But that doesn't mean you can't make your own SQL Server based off of what's called Elastic Cloud Computing EC2 instance, where basically you just spin up a Windows account or Linux, now that we have a lot more Linux options in SQL Server, and just install it from there. But that's not what you're here for, so let's talk about RDS. So when you go in the console, right now I just have one instance running. I have a bunch of snapshots from old stuff I have. I probably should delete those. And then, parameter groups, stuff like that. But, I want to create a database. So when I create a database, I have many options here. Like I said, Aurora is their kind of built-in thing. It's only with MySQL and Postgres, unfortunately. So there's no SQL Server option with that. But you also have MySQL, Maria, if you're a person who likes that instead, Postgres and Oracle. But the SQL Server, we got this one. And we can either use Express Edition, Web Edition, Standard Edition, or Enterprise. Like I said, you can bring your own license or not. It all depends. I'm just going to use Express Edition because I want to be cheap. So, and like I said, because this is Express Edition, you only get the license included part. But you can, if you're on Enterprise, you've got already a thing with Microsoft. You can set that up in the account up here and go to your My Organization and say, hey, here's my account information from Microsoft for these SQL servers, basically. So, with the engine, like I said, we can go all the way back to 2008 R2, but I like the new shiny stuff, so I'm going to go with 2017. Be nice if they get 2019. I talked to an RDS account guy, I think I want to say like 6 months ago, and he said that they're already working on that one because they want to do, but they're waiting for, of course, the release, the RTN. So with this, and this is something to consider here. If you want to stay in the free tier, you can click here, and it'll just let you select what's in free. But obviously, one CPU with 1 gig of RAM is not great for SQL Server. So, maybe 2 gigs is what you want. 2 CPUs, 4 gigs of RAM is a good starting point. But this is because it's we're using Express, and that's pretty much all they offer. So, but I'm going to stay in the free tier for now. Time zone, all of our servers are usually on UTC, so I usually stick with that. Let's see. Yeah, so UTC. Sounds good, but you can do anything, obviously, any time zone that works for you. So one thing to consider here, so because we're on the free tier, it only lets me have 20. If I wanted to go higher, I would be charged more. And your IOPS are actually dependent on how much space you buy. So let's see if I can bring up that stage here. See if they've got it. Okay, so basically what you're looking at here is IOPS go up to 3,000, and then if you get a bigger one of like 5 terabytes, you're looking at 16,000. We at 0 here, we pre-mount everything to 1 terabyte because at the time this was the max. And if we had known that, we may go to 5 terabytes, but we have a lot of empty space, so it's really hard to tell. So just keep that in mind that your performance is based on how much space you buy, basically. So, but I'm just going to keep it 20 for the test. Pass virtual, and if you are a DBA, please don't do what I just do. I'm just doing this for tech demo. All right, so now we get to what's called the virtual private cloud. So you can have many different private clouds. So let's say you have one. This usually has to do with what's called microservices in AWS. So basically breaking out your environment into little tiny services that consume each other, basically, rather than having this one big monolith. So I can make a microservice for this particular RDS instance. Maybe it's for the payroll app or something like that. And then I can make another one for the main web server and stuff like that. So I could have many different VPCs, and they could talk to each other over those said VPCs. For now, I'm just going to use the default, but keep in mind you can move that around a little bit. Subnets, I can change the IP ranges I want and things like that. I'm not really interested in that with the free tier, so I'm just going to go ahead and default it. So public accessibility, keep this in mind. You can make this as dangerous as you want. AWS, by default, does not open it up to the world. What it does is it says, you have basically nothing open, but then I can tell it, yes, I want everything open. And that's what I'm going to do, is because then I want to connect actually to it. So availability zones. So we're talking about the actual warehouses of data, of the server rooms, basically, that they have all across the country. So US East is in North Virginia, which is basically, if you're familiar with, like most warehouses have like IAD, ORD, and IAD is Washington, ORD is Chicago, DFW is Dallas-Fort Worth. So US East, when we're talking that, where it's basically that kind of warehouse within the area of Washington. They don't tell you specifically. And you can say specifically, this is one data center, this is another data center, this is a third, so on and so forth. And you could say, I want to go specifically to this one. This is the one I want. And it'll just make it on that one rather than random roulette, basically. I don't really have a preference, so I'm just going to let it do what it wants to do. So with security groups, I can either create a new one or choose one I already have. Obviously, I've done this demo a lot, so I have a ton of them that are just sitting there. I'll just go ahead and let it create a new one. It's just easier sometimes. If you already have a domain set up on AWS, you can use that for Windows Server authentication. I don't, obviously, so there's nothing available to me. But I can also create a new one. This has a lot to do with like a service called Route 53 and things like that. But it's up to you how you want to do that. We can change the default port. We can also change what's called parameter groups and option groups. So when you install SQL Server, obviously there are certain types of options you can pick for the installation. That's what these basically are, these parameter and options groups. they basically say, I can pick this or I can pick that. So that's kind of what those comes down to. I don't really care. I'm just going to leave the defaults on. Encryption, like I said, because I'm using Express, I don't have that available to me. But if you had Enterprise, you could enable the encryption that's given with SQL Server. We choose not to use that at 0 because you can encrypt the elastic blob storage that AWS offers, and it's easier just to do it that way. So that way it's always encrypted, basically. All right, so backups. So this was the first problem we had when we came to RDS. So we wanted this as our production issue. At the time, you could not take a native backup of SQL Server. So when we looked at this, our max for any backups we wanted was 35 days. That was not going to work for us as an accounting company because we need to keep 7 years of data. So that was kind of strike one for us. So, but we weren't willing to give up on it yet. We may still have a use for it. So at that point, we couldn't do that. Now, since then, they have allowed native backups, but it is not within RDS itself to do the native backup. The way to do the native backup is you have to spin up another EC2 instance, have Windows installed, things like that. You know, before then it was Windows, of course, because we didn't have the Linux stuff. Have Windows installed, and then do the backup there, and then be able to push it to their block storage, which is called S3. And you know, it's an okay scenario. I'd rather just have them have like a checkbox here and say, make backups to this S3 bucket. That would be a lot easier for me. And I do, like I said, I've talked to some of the AWS and the RDS engineers, and they have it on their roadmap to do something like that, but it's not a high priority for them because it's easy enough for you to just do that on your own. And especially with Linux, you could set up what's called a ECS cluster, which is a Docker container cluster, basically, and have that thing just spin up at the time you need to do the backup. And it will have SQL Server pre-installed already, does the backup, then destroys itself. So it's not something that's huge on their priority at this time. So just keep that aware. So we weren't willing to give up on it yet. We were thinking, well, maybe we could use this for our testing environments, you know, and things like that. So, so monitoring, they have built-in monitoring. They give you enhanced monitoring, goes a little further. This mostly is for like MySQL and Postgres, though. It's not a lot. Doesn't really help SQL Server that much. I don't really care if someone is to say all that. So Performance Insights is kind of their query monitoring thing. I personally do not like it. It is not ready for prime time, is what I would say. It gives you some query insights, but not a huge amount. I would rather just use like Quest is a good one with Foglight, and I'd rather use something like we use SQL Monitor from Redgate or something like that. So just keep in mind, you probably still need to use those kind of outside monitoring tools. It's up to you though, as your organization, what they want to spend. So I don't care about that, so I'm going to disable it. So maintenance, you can decide if you want them to do the minor versions for you, or do you want to be specific and just wait for major versions, or do you just, it all depends on how you want to get stuff done. They pre-bake everything a lot to make sure that that it won't break your stuff. And you can go into the instance and say, hey, I know that this particular patch has a big issue. Let's skip that patch. And that's a possibility, but you have to catch it before they're willing to do it. But a lot of the times they do stuff that you just don't even know that they upgraded or not. So keep that in mind, that sometimes it's a little prohibitive that way. So I don't really care about this because I'm just going to destroy this later, but another thing they offer is what's called deletion protection. So with the cloud, you have a lot of people in your stuff moving around because it's pretty easy to do anything within the cloud. So with deletion protection, you can basically, like, rather than just clicking a bunch of things and then hitting the task and deleting, this actually comes up with error messages and says, hey, are you really sure you want to delete this? And you have to actually specifically tell it a bunch of checkboxes and things like that. As far as automation goes, where you could go through the CLI, AWS CLI, you have to specifically say in the CLI, yes, I want to delete this as well. So it will stop automatic deletions, so that's always good. So I'll just keep that on. Well, actually I don't. I'm just going to delete it later. So I'm going to create my database. And it's that simple. It starts creating it. Obviously this is SQL Server, so it takes a little bit to install. These are not core boxes. These are Windows straight up boxes, according to the RDS architecture team. That may have changed because they wanted to get the time down, they told me. I think the last they told me they can spin up one in about 12 minutes. So obviously you don't want to sit here and watch me just twiddle my thumbs for 12 minutes. So I went ahead and made one already. So let's go look at that. And as you can see here, it's just SQL Server. There's nothing, special about it. It gives you an endpoint to connect to, but you could make a nice name instead. They have a thing called the Route 53, which uses C names and things like that. So it's, not that big a deal. When you get the database, there is already a database installed. It's called RDS Admin. And, that's got some of their built-in tools, things like that. And there's a lot of security actually in here that they build in. Let's see if I can, I might have to back out, come back in. Hold on. And let's see, go to users. Yeah, so they've got a bunch of roles. Those are all the regular roles. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. Let me look at the server. One second here. No, they don't do as much in this one. Okay. But there are some server roles that they have that are RDS specific. Maybe that's more for Postgres than I'm thinking about. But Postgres has a bunch of ones that just say RDS admin or RDS this. You do not have SA access into this. So just keep that in mind. You can't blow away the RDS admin database. It will not let you do it. But, it's really not that hard. You just make a new database. Yeah, and it's just a regular table like anything else. Let me see if I have. I think I still have. Give me one second. There we go. That's an old one. Yeah, I don't know where to go with that. I thought I had some scripts, but I guess they're gone. That's okay. But you can just make a new table. ID, int, date, name, name. So, you know, this is regular SQL Server stuff, and then table 1's fine. So I'm not really doing anything like phenomenally, you know, broken or anything like that. So, you know, it's once you actually get it up and going, it's no different than any other SQL Server you ever have. One thing, though, to keep in mind, compatibility issues. This was strike 2 and 3, basically, for us. When you're talking the database itself, this server itself, go here. Where'd it go? When it installs it in the default compatibility mode. But properties, you can't change that. So we have some weird compatibility modes because we are a New Zealand-based company and accents matter. And also we have a bunch of clients in China and Chinese characters matter. So unfortunately, if I ever wanted to use tempdb, I would have to do a convert on every line of my code when it came to connecting with text. When it comes to the actual database itself, though, you're no problem. You can change that. But the problem is if I'm trying to do a tempdb connection, it just won't let that happen. So, oh, they changed that too. I guess you can't do that now too. So, like I said, as I warned you guys at the beginning, when it comes to AWS, things change constantly. So this was the permission I could change at one time. So, am I in the wrong place? Could be in the wrong place. Yeah. Okay. So I can change it in here. Let me double check and see if they've updated it, because that was something I kept telling them to go on the roadmap. So let's see if they listen to me or not. They did. They listened. Okay. So see, this is what the great thing about cloud is. It's an ever-changing environment and can change at any time. So let's see if it works. Oh, no. Yep. So yeah, I can select it, but I can't alter it. So basically, same thing. You know, you just can't change it. So that is a downfall. And at that point, basically, we would have had to rewrite our entire code base, because we do sometimes do connections on integers. It'd be fine, but like anything with GUIDs, we have GUIDs a lot, and also anything to do with like connecting the names or anything like that on the database, it just wouldn't work. You'd have to put, like I said, you'd have to put the collate function on each side, and that's a lot of code to rewrite. So if that is not an issue for you in your environment, though, I would this would be just fine for anybody who has that kind of thing. So unfortunately, we couldn't use it for ours as well. So, let's go back to the slides here. So obviously, you know, that's just creating one SQL server, and what did that take me, like 5 minutes? Obviously, that's not that big a deal. But what if you had to convert hundreds or even thousands of SQL servers? Obviously, I wouldn't want to go through that in 1,000 times. That'd be a pain in the butt. So what I would want to do is I would want to automate it. And AWS offers a lot of great tools, especially one called CloudFormation. So all of these connections here are just templates, and they use what's called JSON, or if you're more familiar in the Linux world, there's one called YAML. Either one will work. It doesn't really matter. But all these connections here are basically like those little drop downs I was connecting to. These are all the same thing. That's all this is. That's the allocated storage. I put 20. I could have gone to 100 if I wanted more IOPS. Major version upgrades. Availability zones. Engine. I can change it. Obviously from SQL Server to Postgres or whatever. Engine version, enterprise, or if I wanted Express, things like that. So, these are really simple templates, and I could do like a million of these and then just have something in the program that says, that iterates through the name and gives the name like a nice name, or gives it something based on the server that I'm connecting to. So if I'm creating a new RDS instance and I know I'm just saying 1 through 100, I don't really care, I could just have it iterate through and say, create server 1, create server 2, so on and so forth. So this makes it really easy to spin up a ton of instances right away. Keep in mind, it will be expensive if you do not watch what you're doing. But it all depends on what you guys want on your environment. So just keep that in mind. So it makes it really easy. There are also other companies called like Terraform and things like that will build the CloudFormation kind of for you. But with RDS, it's actually kind of easy to follow along how this kind of works. So, but if you want it more nice, there's a bunch of other companies that work on that stuff. So lastly, before I leave, the one thing I would like to show you here is a new product they just came out with a little while ago called Aurora Server. So with this, you don't actually have a database instance. It keeps all the instances kind of in a warm pool, and the application connects via proxy to the database that's up and ready to go at that time. So let's say you're as a company only work from like 9 to 5. That's all you have. You don't have to worry about. You're not worried about 24/7 things like that. And I'm like, well, why am I paying for this RDS instance? With this, you don't have to worry about that. The only thing you're paying for is storage while your instance is down. So what do you consider down is after 2 hours of no connections to the database, it will tear itself down, and you'll just have the storage layer ready to go. And that's the whole point of Aurora, is it separates the data layer, the database engine from the storage engine. And your storage engine is always available, basically. Upon connection to the database, within 1 to 2 seconds, a database will spin back up and you're ready to go again. So this is really cool in the way you could scale this out and also be able to have this as just an easy thing to keep costs down, as it were. You're still paying the license. That's not going to go away. But with this, you don't have to worry about like, am I paying extra for a machine that just sits there and does nothing? So it's pretty good with that. My thought has always been this kind of thing. This could be scaled infinitely. So if I do this, we at Xero have what's called organizations. That's basically like one person paying the bill, basically. But those organizations could have 50 employees or something like that. With organizations, I could say, give me one database per organization. Everything could be really low to the ground. We're talking like maybe 2 gigs of memory. I don't need anything else. Everything, one database per person. And this could be a great way to scale out if you're looking for a huge amount of data, but you want to keep your maintenance. In my experience, everybody's always got some database maintenance that they have to do. This will make it less of a hassle, and also technical debt is something that never gets tackled for some reason. And with this, you don't have to worry about this much, for sure. Just something to think about. So, and this kind of stuff is also coming to SQL Server in 2019. where they have like a whole layer of storage as well, and you just connect to the stored layer, and you can disconnect your, it basically would be through containers, through Kubernetes. So this is also something we could do in SQL Server eventually as well. So as we're concluding here, these are kind of the credits we have. AWS has actually a really amazing documentation. I would akin it to the same thing as Docs and also MSDN. It's really well thought out. It really has a lot of good information. If you're ever looking for something like that, I would definitely recommend this. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Let's see.
All right, I am looking in, and there aren't any questions yet, but we did have a couple people reply to your earlier question about how long they've been using AWS, and there was one for that had mentioned that he'd used it, has been using it for about the past 18 months. And
okay.
All right, we did have a question that just came in. What is the I/O block size for storage? Is it the same for all DBs, and can it be changed? As Oracle runs better with 4K and SQL Server prefers 64K block size.
Yeah, it's adjustable within AWS. It's got a lot of its own little tweaks you can do behind the scenes. And that's mostly just to do with AWS itself. But it mostly has to do with whether you're doing what's called provisioned IOPS or general IOPS. So everything pretty much is SSD. You can go back to circular disk if you want to save some money, but they don't recommend it. But there's also general IOPS, which basically is, like I said, based on the speed of how much of you have, basically. And there's also what's called the provisioned IOPS. And provisioned IOPS gives you a premium, but it does cost more. And you can bump up the IOPS if you need to and things like that. So
great. And that is the only question we've got in there. So, Chris, I'm going to thank you for joining us today. And, we got one more that came through. We have found several places where we had to install SQL on an EC2 instance because RDS does not support the full feature set of SQL. Examples are replication and bulk insert. Yeah, so there's, as you mentioned, there's some things that just aren't currently supported, and those are reasons, those two are reasons why you'd want to go ahead and do your own install.
Yeah, it's the same thing as like Azure SQL database as well. They just don't, you're not getting SSAS, you're not getting SSIS or SSRS.
Right.
Definitely replication is gone, things like that. So anything to do with like, I have to go in and do major installs into the server, it just won't do it. So and you're not their target demographic for that kind of basically.
Right. All right. Well, that is all we've got for today. So, Chris, thanks for presenting today with the rest of the audience. Thanks for joining us.